Welcome back to the next installment of our Vienna City Walks. We are most excited to show you the highlights of the city, so come and join us. So we are walking now from the Albertina to one of the wonderful squares of the Imperial Palace. We are here at Josefsplatz, named according to the monument of Emperor Joseph II. Joseph II, he was the most important son of Maria Theresia. He was emperor together with her for a while and then also alone. He was a really important reformer. He had an important grandfather, Emperor Charles VI, who had the building behind Joseph II's monument erected in the 1720s. It was in those days one of the most important libraries in today's Europe. And it is a large library still nowadays, National Library, and everybody already in the time of Emperor Charles VI, so 300 years ago, was allowed to enter there. Only when the emperor entered the library, it was personally for him, but for the rest it was an open space. And it was so important for him that everybody has a chance to read a book. And not everybody, of course, in those days was able to do that. And the iconography, if you look on top of the building, there are some interesting statues. Like in the center, there is Pallas Athene on the horse, and there is a figure left side seen from us falling down, and that's the ignorance. And the idea was that we should fight against ignorance. So the more people read, the more, let's say, they know what is going on, and it's better for the benefit also of the state. So very, very modern already in those days. There is another wing just behind me, and that was added like in the 1760s to the Imperial Palace, and it was a ballroom and still is nowadays. It's the Redutensäle, and the Redutensäle are in this time, so like for 2 years, it is the seat of the Parliament, and that's why I can read also there. It's written Parliament. Actually, the Imperial Palace has a lot of function rooms. They can all be connected. Up to 6,000 people can go to functions in the Imperial Palace, conventions, congresses, balls, all kind of venues are taking place there. And at the moment, as I said, there is our parliament. And in front of the Imperial Palace are also some tinier palaces, but not less important. Everybody who was working for the imperial family tried to have also the palace nearby. And the building that you can see now, Pallavicini, was originally built for a banker, Mr. Fries, and that was in the 1780s. And the building was a scandal in those days. The central floor is not the bel étage, so the piano nobile, the floor with the higher windows and the ballroom and the reception rooms, but it's the last floor. This was against all, let's say, what was the trend in those days, already since the 1500s. There were strict rules how a palace should be structured, and this was a scandal. Well, here at the Josefsplatz is also an interesting exhibition at the moment going on, because it's the birth year of Ludwig von Beethoven. He was born 250 years ago in Bonn in Germany, but he decided he wants to be in the city where Mozart is, and he came over here and then lived here for 35 years until he died at the age of 56 in Vienna. And here is an exhibition which is also referring to the 9th Symphony, to the last choir, to the Götterfunken. Today the anthem of Europe, and actually the premiere of the 9th Symphony was here in Vienna, so the place where he lived, and it was next to today's State Opera House, because the old Opera House, Kärntner Tortheater, where it premiered, was in those days, so more than 200 years ago, on Albertina Square, but set let's say next to the old city wall. And Beethoven's exhibition is still going on until January. So there is the chance to have a look at it, maybe, also live. But at the moment we are standing in front, and you can see also next to the entrance a beautiful insight into the hall where this Beethoven exhibition is, the State Hall of the library, still with the original interior of the 18th century. So it's really a charming also place inside, sometimes even used for small concerts for chamber music. And now we're going to see some more aspects of the Imperial Palace. So the emperor did not only have a library and some ballrooms, but of course also places where his horses were, the place where he lived, where other institutions were. The Imperial Palace is a complex of different wings built over more than 640 years. We are here in front of the main entrance of the Imperial Palace. Main entrance, but it's actually one of the younger parts of the Imperial Palace. It was only built after the court theatre. The Burgtheater was demolished here and was newly erected, newly opened in 1888 on the Ring Boulevard. And then they started to build finally and complete what was already planned for more than 170 years before, to make this whole front as a main entrance of the palace. The only part that was really finished in the 1720s is the one here on the left-hand side of the square that belongs to the Imperial Riding School, the Spanish riding school. It has been opened in the 16th century in Vienna and got a new riding hall here in the 1720s, and it's still there. So there are about 70 Lipizzaner horses, the famous white horses. They give performances here still in that riding hall on the left. And these are the stables of the Lipizzaner horses. Lipizza is in Slovenia, and Slovenia was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire formerly. In the 16th century, the imperial family, the Habsburg, started to rule nearly all over the world. And they were also the kings of Spain. And from Spain they had some horses brought over that were brought then up in Lipizza. But here in Vienna is the center of, let's say, the tradition of this very special kind of horse riding. It's sort of like a horse ballet. So the horses, they do have the stables here, but they cross every day for the morning training the streets to get into the riding hall, where they have performances, they have their trainings. And what is new, since a lady was the general manager, and actually also now it's a lady, the director of the Spanish riding school, even women could start to become horse riders here. And this was a new tradition here in the Spanish riding school. The square is called Michael Square, Michaelerplatz, because there is a very old church here at the square, already since the 1200s. And in the middle of the square there is some evidence that the city has much, much older, much deeper roots than to the medieval days. So we're just next to some Roman excavations that date back to the 1st century. Actually, we can see it here, 2nd century to the 4th century. That's when Vienna was called Vindobona or Vindobona. So for the first 5 centuries after Christ, Vienna was a Roman city, as we know now. It was a city, not just a fortress. And here was already like the suburbs of this Roman fortress. And it's not only Roman excavations we can see here, but it's also from the Baroque period. So this very deep cellar that you can see at the moment shows different kind of material, stones from over the centuries, and that's from the 1700s. So it's a mix that you can see here from different periods. There was even once the cemetery of St. Michael Church, which is just ahead of us. St. Michael Church shows us now its front, which is from the late 1700s. Inside there are still elements from the Romanesque period, what they, set free. A famous piece of music sort of like premiered here, and it was the Requiem of Mozart. So it was according to Mozart's own funeral that the Requiem was played here in St. Michael's Church. The Requiem was commissioned by somebody else. Mozart was actually only a ghostwriter for this piece, so he said, okay, money is good enough. I don't have to be only, let's say, the one which is on the title. But later on, it was even played for his own Requiem, and somebody else completed it, so he could not finish it. He died before he could complete the Requiem himself. It was in 1791 in December. So we're now in one of the very small, narrow courtyards of the Imperial Palace complex. Since every century there was a new wing added to the palace. There are some like niches, like also here. The palace on this side, so right side of you, is the oldest part of the palace from the 1200s, changed a few times. And in the 1300s they added also a chapel. to the palace, and that's where the Vienna Boys Choir has been singing for more than 500 years for the Mass Sunday morning. Originally, the Boys Choir was a choir only singing for the Mass for the imperial family, and nowadays it's a worldwide famous choir. Actually, it's 4 choirs, each 25 boys that are in the age between 11 and 14, when I'm really informed. And they are touring all over the world usually, and they have here their main location for Sunday morning, and they have also in the school premises where they have a new theater since 2012 where they have their own productions, but also contemporary, modern music is also performed over there. It's actually the oldest part of the palace is the Treasury. Already since the medieval days, so the crown jewelries of the imperial family, the famous crown of the Holy Roman Empire, and also the crown of Austria, amongst other precious parts, you would see in the treasury of the Imperial Palace. It's a courtyard in the middle of this old castle that was transformed in the 1500s. We're now walking through a little path between the small niche and the old courtyard, and we can see some images showing also some details of the crown of Austria, so you can see it really enlarged, so the original would be inside. And there are some entrances into this oldest part of the palace. One over there with the clock, it's the ambassador staircase that goes directly to some of the function halls in the palace. And then where there's now the construction site on the left-hand side is the entrance to the church where the Vienna Boys Choir sings every Sunday morning for the Mass. And Emperor Franz Joseph that I mentioned already before, this would have been too narrow for him. He preferred another wing, and we are going now over there to the main courtyard of the palace. And we have a beautiful view now already by going to the other courtyard, to this Renaissance entrance from the 16th century, from 1553, as it's also in Roman letters visible up there. And also the ceiling fresco in this old entrance, this old gateway from the old castle, shows various coat of arms of the various regions in Austria. So the very big facade there with the Hercules statues and many balconies, and you can see a green dome. That's the wing where Emperor Franz Joseph had his apartment. It's a wing that's 300 years old, so much older than the emperor was. And it's a wing that was built actually once for the Chancellor of Emperor Charles VI. Nowadays, you can visit there the imperial apartments where he lived, and also the museum, which is all about his wife, Empress Elizabeth, more known as Empress Sisi. And she had her wing where there's the clock. And you can see also the sun clock. The building where Empress Elizabeth, where Sisi had her apartment, is from the 16th century, but was changed a few times. And you would see how she lived. And there's a monument also here in this courtyard. And he looks like a Roman emperor, the guy up there. That's an emperor who had something to do with the so-called Holy Roman Empire. And he, Emperor Franz, the grandson of Maria Theresa, decided, okay, we have to change something. He said, okay, we quit this empire. Also some other reasons led to this. And this was in 1806. In his time was also the time when Napoleon occupied Vienna. It was the time when it was not very steady around here. And he decided, okay, let's think positive. If there's an enemy, just let him into my family. And his daughter, Marie-Louise, she married Napoleon. So this was a way to sort it out. And that's how it happened very often in the politics of the Habsburg. The building that you can see now, still belonging to the Imperial Palace, is from the 1660s. And in those days, it was a trend. The longer the building, the better it was. And you can see that it's repeating. Every window front looks the same. And there are even some hidden because some other buildings or some other wings of the palace were added later on. And this wing was the apartment wing of the Habsburg, then from the 1660s until the mid of the 19th century, when Emperor Franz Joseph said, no, this is too small for me and my wife, we want to have 2 extra wings. And nowadays our president is working in this building. He's not living here, he lives in the same apartment where he was before he was president, but it's the representative and also the office wing of our president nowadays, and all offices that are connected to it. What are all these buildings apart from the presidential wing and the library that we have already seen? So it's function rooms and museums. In the semi-round wing is, amongst others, the National Library, and there is also the Music Instrument Museum. Then there is also the museum, it's all about the Austrian Republic, which was founded 1918. And well, we are happy it's still there. Now it's the Second Republic since 1945. There is a balcony, and it has the most negative connotation. What I can tell you about this square and the Imperial Palace, it's where Hitler held the annexation speech, the Anschlussrede, in 1938. As a consequence, Austria was then part of Hitler Germany until April 1945. The main square, however, is today a place of peace. Every 8th of May, so the official day of the end of World War II, there's a big party for peace. And this is, let's say, also the statement. And the gentleman here on the right-hand side, he was actually a guy of the Albertina, Archduke Charles, Erzherzog Karl. He is the one who was adopted of Albert and was a very important man in the army. He was the first one in the army who could defeat Napoleon. Actually, 3 months later, Napoleon defeated him, but we don't talk about it. There are 2 wonderful buildings. They look very much alike, and many people are confused still nowadays which is which museum. The one on the left-hand side, seen from us, is the Museum of Fine Art, the Kunsthistorische Museum, which hosts a wonderful collection of art, especially from the 1400s up to the late 1700s. Mostly made in Europe. And on the other side is the Museum of Natural History. Maria Theresa's husband, he was the founder originally of the collection. He bought 30,000 minerals or natural objects in Florence, and today there are 30 million objects in this building. And what is so special about the 2 buildings of the museums? They were built in the 1880s, both opened 1991 as museums. And this was new. It was a new trend in Europe to build museums to host collections. So I told you before, but many people are confused. Where is which museum? Because they look so alike. And how do you find out which is the world of nature and which is the world of art? If you look on top, so you can see that there is a very high dome, and on top of the dome is Helios. So he stands for the world that the sun, let's say, is the center of the universe system. And on the other side is Pallas Athene, and she is the protector of art. So that's how to see it. So the woman is on top of the art museum, and the man on top of the museum which regards nature.